we talked about this before. Let's just dive into it. Marvel and DC, or really more so, Marvel and DC, the companies, and their parent companies are some stingy ass bitches. Is that like just let's
Hmm.
rip the band-aid off? There's some stingy ass bitches. Um, we talked before, remember, like I said, a few months ago about Ta-Nehisi Coates talking about how comics creators are compensated when their work on a comic book is then turned around and exploited in the films to make $1 billion, seven, eight, 900 billion dollar movies, but making big bank for the companies that own the comic companies, and how essentially they aren't doing shit. There's
Yep.
some deals here and there, but they were even talking about how, and this is Marvel right now, they're having a bad pattern of being shitty about this. Um, on the Star Wars side, they didn't want to pay this guy who since the 70s has been writing novelizations and Star Wars novels, and because they bought this stuff from Lucasfilm, but they felt like they didn't have to honor the contracts that this guy had signed, and they finally made it right after he made a stink about it. And so that's part of what I kind of wanted us to talk about, which is one part. There's two parts to this whole compensation thing. One is that there's the so-called shut up money aspect of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so to speak, where they will they will
Hmm.
shortchange and or not honor contracts and or you know give insulting sums to the people who, not just like, oh, they worked on Spider-Man at one time, but no, they created a definitive Spider-Man storyline and characters that are being put into movies
Yep.
and making billions of dollars and on merch and everything like that. And those creators, because they signed a contract at one time that didn't mention streaming or didn't mention the movies or you know what I'm saying, didn't mention
Yeah.
any of this stuff.
Hmm.
And so they are legally within their rights to do what they're doing. And some of these creators are big enough that, and they got enough fans that they can cause a stink, and so they pay them some money to shut them up. So there's, like I said, the shut up money. But the other part is, as I said before, legally they can do this stuff, but is it the right thing to do? Is it right? Is it right for them to take advantage of people? Because that's what it is. They're taking advantage of people who they just have a job, right?
Yep.
They want to write or draw comics for a living, and that's their job, and they enjoy doing it. But at the time, they get paid just enough to make it worth their while. And then, who knows how many years later, a decade, 20, 30 years later, it gets their specific storyline and their design and everything get turned into these huge franchises. And even though there's no legal obligation, is it right for them to actually treat people that way? So that was a long intro, so I'm on a step back. Lottie, let you take the floor um, before I go in on this. So
Yeah. I don't like this. I don't like this one bit. It and it's one of those things that it's just terrible when it comes to comic books stories and a lot of stuff because we all know it's well documented the creator of Superman died unfortunately poor, which is something that is just a disgrace. You know what I mean? It should not have happened. It should never have happened, but unfortunately, it did.
oh,
And
I
it's
actually let me give a little more context. Um, Siegel and Schuster, those are they co-created Spider-Man, not Spider-Man, Superman. Do
mhm.
you know how much money they were paid to give up basically give up their rights to the creation? It was something like 69. No, this is in 1938. Something like $69.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
because of that, DC. was able to just basically be like, yeah, we're not paying you anything. And it wasn't until the 70s until, you know, they sued and there was a long battle and so forth. They finally got, a better compensation. But it was the night. So 40 something years later, they're old men. So that's
Yep.
I just and look, the way they were treated was it's pretty normal. They were treated, if you know about the comics industry, even well into the 70s, it's like a sweatshop.
Yep.
You have a page rate, and the page rate wasn't awesome, but it was enough to live on. You were not a member, you were not an employee, you were a freelancer. There's all sorts of like ways that they got around, and then once it became clear that they could monetize Batman and Superman and so forth, they were trying to figure out ways to screw the creators out of it, contractually. So that's I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yep. It's just, man. It's just one of those things that is just I hate to see it because I write because of course I'm a video game I have a video game that I'm designing, and I write the story of it, and it's just one of those things that is like it's just sad to see that this could happen to you, and you could create such a good story that is so compelling, and then this company can make you feel like the story is absolute, terrible or whatever, and basically trick you into basically just selling it off so you can just be done with it. But then you find out they basically turned this thing into a $1 billion franchise, and you're like, wait, hold up, you know, and I know it's legally is right, but I don't care about legal because let's just be honest, the justice system is sketchy. Is you know what I mean? And it's about morals. These people work so hard to make something so beautiful and so good, and you just treat them like they're nothing, and you just not pay them. And it's just one of those things that it's just so unfortunate. And it's like I said, this goes into it happens all the time in movies, music, video games. I can go down the line, anime. You know, we see the uh the people who made it, like Stan Lee, Masashi Kishimoto in Naruto, Toriyama in Dragon Ball, um, uh, I'm trying to think, Neil Druckmann in Uncharted franchise. We see the people who made it, like they turned their story and they're making money off of their story, and they're the head, and they made it to the top of the company that created that story, and we see that. But there's a lot of people like um the Supermans, like the people who made Superman, that are not making anything. The family's not making anything off of the character, you know. And DC parades them and views them like a $1 billion company. It's just there's a lot of stories like that. Look at the when it comes to what's it called Insomniac. I mean not Insomniac. What's it called? Microsoft and Bungie. Look what they're doing to Halo. Bungie created Halo, and now look at it. They're using that company to itself, and they're not giving Bungie anything. You know what I mean? It's just there's a
And
lot of stories
yeah,
like that.
and I will note that Bungie probably sold the rights or whatever for a pretty penny. Now,
Yeah, yeah,
now the thing now,
we agree.
but here's the difference. So there's a lot of talk about this going around the nerd space and movies and whatever. And I think that instinctively most people, if you have any kind of like empathy for anybody, can recognize the kind of bullshit of seeing your story. And with an understanding, yes, you signed a contract, you're work for hire, yes, yes, yes. I get that. But to see them make $1 billion off and they give you $5,000 in an invitation to a fucking movie premiere,
Hmm.
$5,000, I'd rather
Yeah.
you didn't give me shit than that
Yep.
insulting amount. Like, if a movie grosses $1 billion, and, take the cut for the movie theaters out and the market out. At the end of the day, you still got over a $250 million, probably 300 mil, 400 million dollars that you're banking off of that. You can't give the dude that wrote the story $1 million and roll out. You think that
Mm-hmm.
makes people want to work for you like that? It's how you treat people. This is about how you treat people, and it becomes very easy for a corporate, because this is a let's not split hairs. This is about Disney corporate and Warner Brothers corporate. Now, in the past, it has been about Marvel corporate and DC corporate, but a lot of the people that work at the high levels there, they know what's up, and they're not trying to screw other people out of, because these are people they work with, their friends and all that other stuff. And you always want to maintain good relations with your talent. And that's the problem here, is that bean counters and executives trying to pad their fucking, their, their bonuses, don't give a crap about that. They want to see how much they can squeeze out of this without giving anybody else anything. And it's just you have people that are going to sit here because they're nameless and faceless, and they're doing the works of, they're just doing what the corporation wants, right? So they can say bullshit like they said to Scarlett Johansson about about Black Widow. They can say bullshit to people about, well, they can send someone $5,000, think it's cool, because contractually that's what they can do. But again, you can what's legal and what's right don't necessarily always match up. And
Mm-hmm.
this isn't it's not like, I've heard stupid analogies that people have been talking about. Well, I've heard of one particular from a show that I like, but it was just a stupid analogy about, well, if I pay someone to make some chairs, they can't, and then I use those chairs in the restaurant, and and I make a huge success, and I become, hugely successful. They can't come back and be like, you owe me some more. Can you give me some more money because the chairs were in your restaurant? That's not the same thing.
No.
It's more like if you have a restaurant and
And I give you the secret formula.
yeah, you pay somebody to make make a menu with special recipes that's exclusive to you. You make your own recipes. You pay them $5,000 to make you a bunch of recipes, and then you go on to become, a fucking celebrity, celebrity hotspot, where you're banking millions of dollars per year exclusively, and it's all that person's recipes. Well, who wouldn't think that that's essentially one of the biggest parts of your success is those recipes? You might want to pay this person a little more now that the success, your ability to exploit it is a little better. At least that I think that would be the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's worse than that though, is because, again, this is all about, who it's all friends. So these are friends having to screw each other over. This is Kevin Feige having to look somebody in the face and be like, God dang it, I don't want to screw you over, Scarlett, but that's what the people above me want to do.
Yeah.
And so,
It's
yeah, you got to wonder, like, who the fuck wants to work for Marvel, even if they love Spider-Man. Who the fuck wants to work for them if they know that it's inherent in there's going to be a contract that's going to inherently screw them if if their stuff ever comes to the screen.
Yeah, it's one of those things, man. It's like it goes into what's it called too, man. It goes into sports. It's sort of what's going on with my favorite team. I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and one of our best players, T.J. Watt, right now is in a contract year. And, he's in line to be the highest paid defensive player in the NFL. And that's something that Pittsburgh usually doesn't do. They usually don't pay players that much money outside of a quarterback, and right now he's sitting out, and the head coach is like, he's being asked questions about it, and they're trying to get him to throw TJ Watt under the bus, and he's like, hey man, if I was in the same shoes, I'll do the same thing. Like, you know, for your services, you should be paid this much money. Until they pay you this much money, you shouldn't have to do this. And it's like you said, all these contracts and stuff like this, it just goes back into the Marvel thing. It's like you said, who will want to work, who will want the right comp? Because that's one of the things. I wanted at one point to write comic books. I wanted to be a comic book writer, but then I saw how cutthroat the industry is. I was like, nah, I'm good. I'd rather be put into gaming. You
and
know what I mean?
which is almost as bad.
It's almost like you agree. Yeah, I completely agree. It's almost as bad. But the thing about it is, at least with gaming, I can do it myself and put it on the internet. All I got to do is just really get somebody to watch it. When it comes to comic books, the way comic books are nowadays, you kind of have to be part of a big company because people just don't read independent comic books. You know what I mean?
Not really, not unless it's like, outstanding, outstanding.
Yeah.
You know,
It's one of those things that you kind of
or
have
if
to be.
yeah, or if you're a name. So that's the thing. That's the
Yeah,
thing
big
is,
name.
yeah, you have to make a name for yourself on Marvel Comics, and that's the kind of, we were talking about Ed Brubaker before that did the death of Captain America, and he created the Winter Soldier. He took an existing character and turned him into the Winter Soldier and all this other stuff. Well, and he doesn't do mainstream comics anymore. Robert Kirkman doesn't do mainstream comics anymore. Mark Miller, they don't, you know why? Because they cut their teeth and made their name in
Hmm.
Marvel and DC comics, and then they rolled out because they don't. Even Neil Gaiman, Coraline, Sandman,
Yeah.
American Gods. That dude, the Sandman is a DC comic, um, and one of the greatest comics of all time. I think I mentioned that to you.
Yep.
And he doesn't do that stuff anymore. He doesn't do stuff for other people anymore. He does for himself
Yep.
because that gave him some kind of name, and that's worth something. But the fact that you essentially are telling someone you have to take a low paid internship, maybe turn out some iconic runs on something. We'll never pay you properly for it. And we're not going to give you, we're going to make $1 billion off of your idea, but we're not going to give you $1 million not because we can't, but because we don't want to, we don't have to because it's legal.
Yeah.
And it's, look, let's just call it like it is. It's bullshit.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Like
It's
it,
it's
from in
it's
in an industry that's notorious for screwing people over, that do work for that, who's in an industry that relies on the creators to make their, because the executives, the suits aren't writing anything, they're not drawing shit.
yep.
And so you don't get a Spider Verse without, a writer and artist.
Yep.
You don't get the death of Captain America. You don't get, Superman, of the various iterations of Superman, Batman Court of Owls, which I'm certain is going to make its way into uh, live action at some point. You don't get that stuff without these creators, and so it seems to me like an industry that's based a lot of its success on willfully exploiting people should do better when it comes to the even more lucrative side. But it's money, so they, of course, they're not trying to do right.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like you said, man. It's a sad thing, man. And this is why there should be some type of like, because it's one of those things that it's like there's not enough like deep things to protect artists, writers, and stuff like that, comic book writers, because this is it's a very very beautiful thing because a lot of stories and movies that we consume were once comic books or once graphic novels or something like that. And like you said, the people who created it or the people who worked on it, they're not getting the equal pay. And this is where it's like there has to be a breaking point eventually. There has to be some rules, some workman's comp to stop this because, like I said, at least in video games, you can go out on your own and make an indie game and it can hit big because nowadays indie game like literally you can literally make a game, just post it on the internet and make millions of dollars. I mean, I'm not saying everybody can do it, but it happens because it's more and more because more and more people are into indie games, more and more people like indie games. Is you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But with comic books, you're stuck. There's really no indie comic books. There's really no indie comic book fan base. You know what I mean? The comic book fan base, first of all, is not even that big to begin with. There's a lot of people like what comic books produce, but to actually read a comic book is not as big anymore. You know,
Yeah.
Ev- eventually it will get back to where it is. It's like the same thing where books are starting to make a reemergence in media now. People want to read epic fantasies and stuff like that again. So eventually comic books will get to that point, and when that happens, these comic book writers need to step up and say, no, we're not going to let you pimp us no more. You
Yeah.
know?
And well, so again, like just the fact that in order to even do that, you got to sort of make a name for yourself. So in a way that people will be exposed to you. So it's kind of they're in a position just like comics have always been of being able to exploit people because there's really no other way into the industry to do what you want unless you really want to, like, if you think struggling on the shitty page rates and whatever is hard with Marvel and DC, try doing it self-published or self-financed or whatever, doing it on your own. I mean, there
Yep.
are ways around it like Kickstarter and whatever, but by and large, it's really hard. So the fact that there's an ecosystem that sort of locks people into this cycle should, and this is again, this is a moral question. This isn't about legality. It's just about the morals of it. Can we get away from this idea that the only way we can move forward to in business is to exploit other people to their detriment?
Yep.
That's what I would like for us to get away from. Get away from the idea that in order for Disney to win, the creators have to lose, and instead, when Disney wins, the creators win. Because I think that's
Yep.
better for everybody. So just I just want people who are in power that have the power to do right, just to fucking do right, and not do right because they're shamed into it, but do right because it's the fucking right thing to do. How hard
Yep.
is that? How hard is it to have, like, would you ask yourself when you're making these contracts, if that was your mom on the other side of the table and you're writing this contract, are you gonna fuck her over? Or are you gonna try to do right by her? Well, treat everybody else like that's your relative that you love. And if you can do that, everybody can fucking win. It's not hard. It's really, I don't think it's a hard thing. I just think that the people who manage to get that high up in business, they have a hard time remembering that they can be human beings that don't exploit people because they think it's expected of them. So anyway, I think we're in agreement about this. It's just
Yep.
pisses me off, but I'm not surprised, um, and I hate this. You're making me, complicit in the continuing screwing over of comics creators. So I guess maybe the thing is, let's just go buy some comics from these guys and you know help them continue to have a life outside, and maybe there's an avenue somewhere down the line. Um, I don't know. We just don't know. So.